Welcome to Laguna Podcast, an attempt at illustrating the lives and stories from Texas outdoors. Today I sit down with another Floridian whose two biggest passions seemingly are tarpon and the preservation of tarpon for the future generations. This is my conversation with Bill Bishop.
All right, I'm ready.
All right, actually, I am going to do... Okay, let's not do that.
You remember that? Oh, you don't remember that. That's an old movie.
So before we get started, I'm going to say the same thing I tell everybody else, which I don't think it really pertains here, but if you say something that you wish you didn't, or like, I shouldn't have said this name or this story, tell me after.
Yes.
I'll go back, I'll bleep things if I have to, I'll cut it out completely. The whole point of me telling you this is for you to be as like calm and relaxed as possible. We're just having a conversation.
Oh, don't worry about that.
Cool.
At my age, you don't get intimidated about anything.
It was more of a formality. More of a formality.
You can't scare me.
Good.
Okay.
All right. Well,
I'm ready.
Are you ready? Let's do this. So, I got Mr. Bill Bishop in the chair today, Mr. Poon. I don't know at all how we ended up here through Nate, but I'm extremely excited to do this. With that being said, the way I like to start these after a brief introduction, if you could give me the first memory you've had in the outdoors and kind of run me through your progression as an outdoorsman, getting into the tarpon and whatnot.
Well, it's good to be with you. Good to have you on the boat.
This is a beautiful boat, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a wonderful boat, and we love it, and a lot of great memories. Bought the boat to chase fish with, so my first memory is fishing was when I grew up. Conservation wasn't a word.
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere down the road after that, it came about, but enough was never enough.
Mm-hmm.
If it was fishing or hunting, you shot until you just ran out of shells. And so I remember seeing my dad, he wore a pith helmet.
Pith helmet.
Pith helmet. It was what they wore in Africa. He wore khaki, loose-fitting clothes, and he would stand on the front of the boat, and he would throw a Pin Pier 109 casting reel with linen line. And his plug of choice was a Zara Spook. But back in those days, this is back in the late 40s and early 50s, they weren't Zara Spooks, they were Zaragosas.
Mm-hmm.
They were made out of wood. And he could throw that thing so far because it was heavy. And but at the end of every cast that my dad made with that Pin Pier 109 casting reel, it would overrun itself and a big bird's nest would come off the end of it. And I remember growing up thinking that it was critical that you swear at the end of every cast because he was pulling on all that linen line trying to get the tangles out of it. And I thought, well, that's what you do. You know, you cast and then you cuss.
Oh, okay.
And
sounds like me.
So that was one of my early recollections of walking the dog in the flats on the west coast of Florida.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a great way to grow up. And Dad wasn't happy unless the freezer in the garage, we called it the coffin, and was full of both game and fish. And a trout fillet could be 6 inches long because the trout to start with wasn't over 8, but that's what he kept. He kept everything. I think it was the Depression. That got him to that point. But he would clean the fish and keep the wax cartons out of the milk cartons and fill them up with water and put the fish in it and freeze them in a block of ice. And he'd write on the carton what was in there. And so that's what we did. And you didn't dare open that coffin door. You left that alone. That was off limits. But we always had, fish and game. And
This episode is made possible by our friends over at Gordy & Sons Outfitters, located in Houston, Texas, and employing a team of experienced outdoorsmen specializing in fly fishing, hunting, and wing shooting. Gordy & Sons is sure to prepare you for success in the outdoors. Next time you find yourself preparing for a weekend getaway or a bucket list trip, be sure to give them a visit at www.gordyandsons.com.
Quail and turkeys and deer meat, and we grew up that way.
Mm-hmm.
So, my first recollections, the outdoor experience was all of that.
And then your progression as an outdoorsman, like how you got into the skinny water stuff, eventually how you got into tarpon and how that actually like had a hold on your life and whatnot.
Well, ultimately, I love to catch snook. I always enjoyed catching snook in the mangroves.
Mm-hmm.
And my first reality of freedom wasn't on a bicycle. It was in a boat. And at home, I had an 8-foot pram. That's what we called it. Now they call them John boats.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
This was a wood, what we called a pram with a 5.5 horsepower kicker on it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I went to school. I could run through the chain of lakes in Winter Park and go to there's a college called Rollins College in Winter Park, and I would tie up there and walk up to the top of the hill. And I was still young, but I was in the early years of high school, and stop at the smoking bench because everybody smoked.
Distractions, yeah.
Well, if you didn't smoke, you were a communist back in those days. And so I'd stop and have a Marlboro because I liked that Marlboro guy until I
red,
found
white, and
out
blue.
that he died of lung cancer, and I thought, that ain't so cool. But I'd go to homeroom, and they'd call the roll, and then I'd haul ass back down to my boat and take off and go fishing, in the lakes. And so that was my first sense of freedom.
Okay.
And was running a skiff, albeit an 8-foot one with a 5.5 horsepower kicker on it. Then that graduated to going down to a place called Englewood on the west coast of Florida,
Mm-hmm.
where he would rent a wooden boat called a Courtney, flat bottom wood skiff, made out of cypress, a heavy boat, bulky. And we'd strap that same 5.5 horsepower motor on the back. It was slow as Methuselah, but it got you there. And I remember learning how to work the mangroves with my foot on the tiller,
Mm-hmm.
steering it, and throwing the plugs up in the mangroves and watching those snook come out of there and busting limbs and carry it on. And that was great fun. And my dad hated tarpon.
Really?
Well, they'd steal all his string. We'd be down at Stump Pass live bait fishing, and tarpon would grab it and just
Spool it.
run off with it, heading back to Cancun, and couldn't stop it, and that was it. And so we'd have to come home. He didn't have any more string. And but I thought they were pretty damn cool because I remember seeing them launch off. And so somewhere along the line, I got tangled up with the tarpon. And
Wait. What do you mean somewhere along the line? You don't remember like the first instance?
I
Like,
do.
whoa. Okay,
I do.
well let's relive that real quick.
well, we had a place in New Smyrna Beach, and there was a elementary school there. And behind the school, I found these small tarpon.
Mm-hmm.
I see small, 60 down to 40s. And so I got it in my head that I'd been doing some fly fishing at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And so my son and I, again, we had an outboard kicker on this back of this boat, and we went out there to see if I could catch one of those things on a fly rod. And I didn't know what fly to put on, so I put a Lefty's Deceiver on it. Looked like a bait fish, Threw it over there, and we hooked this tarpon, and boy, it went on and on. I had no idea what in the world was happening. All I knew is that I was going to do that again. And we ended up sort of catching the fish because my son grabbed the fish and the fish jumped up in the air and almost pulled him overboard. And finally we didn't get the fly back, but we caught him as far as we were concerned.
Mm-hmm.
And we were coming back in. It was pitch black dark. I remember I hit something coming in, and the damn motor came off the back of the transom, went underwater, and we rode home. And next day we came back and got the motor and hosed it off, and it ran for a little while after that, and then it gave up the ghost. But it was that one tarpon.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. He seemed like 200 pounds to me. I think he was probably more like 40. But it was something to watch.
You briefly overviewed that part. You did not tell me how you got into actual fly fishing.
I had a friend of mine who had a fly rod.
Okay.
And I noticed that when we'd go fishing, he never pulled it out. And I'd ask him why, and he said, well, the wind's blowing. I said, it was blowing when we got here. Why'd you bring it? So I picked it up and started trying to do something with it, and I couldn't do anything. And I wanted to learn how to cast, which seemed like the most impossible thing for me to do.
Mm-hmm.
Because back then, you didn't have YouTube. You didn't have, there was no way to learn. You could read a book, but it's hard to learn how to cast from a book, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And especially when you're not familiar with what you're trying to do to begin with. So, ultimately, I met Tommy Locke. And Tommy, I met Tommy, I was putting on a turkey calling seminar, which I love to hunt turkeys. And Tommy came into the turkey hunting seminar on calling turkeys. And he walked over and he said, "You're pretty good at calling turkeys." And I remember saying to him, "I can call them out of Publix freezer department into the parking lot. Yeah, I'm good at it." And so we got to be great friends. So I made him a deal that I'd teach him how to call turkeys if he'd teach me how to
Cast a fly rod.
throw a fly rod. So he loaned me a J. Kennedy Fisher blank and a Systems 3 fly reel, which was a purple reel that they made back in those days. Really a cool reel. And so I spent all of that fall trying to throw that fly rod. And I have to say that I finally was able to do it. And but I was every morning before I'd go to work, I'd go to this field and throw that fly rod until I got to the point where I thought I was really something with it. And turns out that I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what to do with it once it got out there. So, it was a big experiment, but I knew I loved it.
Mm-hmm. So now backing up to the first tarpon story, how was it finding that, or feeling that addiction to tarpon, moving through it and having to kind of basically live a parallel life as you started progressing as a tarpon angler?
I'm not a well-rounded sportsman. I'm not. I don't really give a damn about catching much than tarpon on a fly rod. I really don't. I'll go bone fishing if I like the people I'm bone fishing with. It's kind of a social exercise. And I guess the only fish that intrigues me is big snook. Mm-hmm. Beyond that, but it's always been tarpon. You feel that in your hands. You watch that eat, and you're looking at the fish, and fish turns and uncoils on the back of that thing and follows it up, and they overeat. They don't need to do that, but they just explode and there's nothing like it to feel that thing come tight in your hands. And
If you're enjoying this episode or any others and want to support the project, I would highly encourage you to check out my new book, Laguna. 288 pages with over 300 images and illustrations, containing excerpts by Eric Glass, Chuck Nizer, Tim O'Brien, Bill Gamble, Ben Paschal, Ryan Sparrow, Michaela Elliott, Rick Hartman, Yako Lucas, John Pilmer, Corey Bauman, Brian Robinson, and myself. Available at select stores, or you can order it directly at buylagunabook.myshopify.com.
Nothing that I'd ever fished for did that before. So it's addictive. And it's almost like what I would envision of using the word a fix. You need a fix. You need to get a poon to come up here and inhale that thing, and
Your dose.
yeah. And, the tug is the drug. Well said. And it's so cool that's my grandson speaking up here, sitting next to me, watching him and his brother Wyatt get to the point where, they didn't high stick the rod. We went through all of that, and watching them land that first poon. And I'm blessed to be there and see what I saw years before that in them. And so it's kind of like watching the same movie over and over. It's kind of neat. And
But watching it through like a fresh pair of eyes.
yeah, and I don't fish when they're on the boat. I don't pick up a rod. You couldn't put a gun to my head and make me do it because yeah. Well, unless they keep screwing up, then I grab it right out of their hand. No. Yeah, or that. But I'd rather see them. But the problem is with some youngsters, I think you want them to succeed so bad that you want it more than they want it for themselves.
Absolutely.
And that's when it gets to be a problem. And they want to go in, and you go in? What, have you lost your mind? We're going to be out here for 4 days. So there's a fine line there. And took me a while to figure that out.
One of the things I wanted to mention, since you brought up the fact that you were essentially like a purist for tarpon, one of the things I obviously wanted to bring up was high rollers in the book and the story behind it.
Yeah.
I am curious though, how many years went by where you were like actually targeting these fish and getting good at it and learning all the different techniques, strategies, whatnot, till you actually ended up coming up with the book?
I started out at the deep end of the pool. I didn't, that first fish, no, that wasn't the deep end of the pool. That was behind the school.
Yeah.
But after that, once that I was able to throw the fly line and make it go some distance, I called Tommy up and I said, I got your rod. I'm going to bring it back to you, but I'm ready. I'm ready. He said, you can cast. I said, oh, I can throw the hell out of this thing. I'm ready. And my first experiment in the real world of tarpon fishing was Homosassa, where the average fish was 130, 140. And I can't tell you how debilitating that was to stand on the pointed end of that skiff with Tommy, who to this day I believe is one of the finest people and finest guides on God's blue planet, said, here we go. 2:00 coming straight in. And I looked out there. There was no tarpon in that field. There wasn't even one. And when I saw those submarines coming across that white sand, it was unbelievable to me. I've never seen anything like that. Other than maybe the movie Jaws, you know. and he said, cast. Well, yeah, where? And my first cast I hooked up. Honest to God, true story. I hooked up. Problem was I hooked Tommy right in the back. And I buried that. Back then we used a 3-aught Mustad, hook, and it went all the way in. And I looked at Tommy, and Tommy was a catcher in baseball, and he was built like a spark plug. And I thought, oh my God, he's going to come down here and kill me. And he reached around the back of his shirt, and there's this big red stain coming out through the T-shirt, and yanks it out and says, throw it again. And I said, no, I want to go home.
I'm so sorry.
I want my mommy. I mean, it was just, oh my God. I was just like, you got to be kidding. And we fished, through the day, but I drove home thinking, oh my God, what a total disaster. It was the most intimidating thing. But I'm going back there. I'm going back there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to figure this stuff out. And so over time, we found some fish in the lagoon, and they weren't small fish. They were good fish. And the hurricane ran Flip out of South Florida, and I met Flip, and we became like instant buddies.
Oh, don't gloss over that story. I'm interested in it.
All right. Well, I met him at a function. It was the hospital was putting on, and we got to talking, and he was telling me how he had this place to hunt in Okeechobee, and he and Al Chittum,
Mm-hmm.
and I said, you got any turkeys on it? He said, we're covered over with turkeys. They had 40-something thousand acres with the 3 of them on it. And he said, do you want to go turkey hunting? I said, when? So he said, right away. I said, hell yeah, let's go. So we went down there. I would guess that was I don't know how many years ago. A lot. And I would imagine the statute of limitations has run out on that whole thing.
Probably.
Yeah, I think so. And we started shooting turkeys and having the best time. And so eventually we started fishing together. And I mentioned to him, I got a place that I got some good tarpon. And so we started fishing that. And somewhere in all of that, I had that heart attack and made the list. And I said, I want to meet Lefty. And he put that together for me. And we brought him there to that place.
I feel like you glossed over a lot of details on that one too.
I know.
It's okay. I'm going to remind you. Don't worry. I know the wine's probably hitting you right now. So
No.
So let's go a little bit back. I really would like to know first some of your favorite memories with Flip on the boat.
Oh, Lord. I think the first trip we went to Flamingo. And there was a big tailing snook. People don't talk about tailing snook, but you've seen that. And I made a cast, and I hit his tail. And he blew up, and I turned around and I said, I am so sorry, because he'd worked so hard to get me in position. He said, no, Duck, it's your fish. You can do whatever you want to with it. Oh my God, this is great. And it's what we were talking about earlier. You meet people after you watched walkers, and and you go, well, nobody can be like that. I mean, and he's more incredible than what the average person that watched walkers. He's just an amazing guy, and he's born 100 years too late. He should have been a pioneer. I mean, but he's the whole package. Running skiffs, he's everything, and he's the best instructor. He's the best there is. That he has a way of saying something that computes to your brain. If you try to teach me, I can't teach anybody anything about the mechanics of fly fishing. I look at somebody and they cast and I go, something's wrong with that, but I'm not exactly sure what
It looks right to me, but it's not doing what it needs to do.
I don't have that eye to hand, and he does. And he was trying to teach Hayden's mom how to cast in our front yard one Thanksgiving. And she couldn't, compute that to hand movement. She just, whatever it was. And she said to him, I'm sorry, I just can't do it. And he said, well, it's just because I haven't said it right yet. And he has that patience of Job. But he then will come back with another analogy, like, start and stop and the paintbrush on the wall and whatever, until he hit it and she did it. And today, there's very few people that I put on the front of my boat that can cast like she can.
Well, you know what you told me? Hammer and nail.
Hammer and nail. That's right. That's exactly right, Hayden. And, but I mean, you take Lefty's was a born teacher. Flip, I think, was every bit of that. And me, not so much. And so I have a rule. I don't put anybody on front of a boat that can't cast. They can't cast. It's not going to happen. And because I don't have that kind of patience. I just don't, unless it's one of my grandsons. And not far from here, maybe 35, 40 minutes, there's an amazing place called my son started it. And there's and so we bob and weave from here to there and back again. And it's the most incredible place in the world. Haired over with turkeys and deer and hogs and ducks and quail and whatever. And so all of the grandkids are down there. And it's really cool to go from here to there. And it's pretty much the same thing. I don't know if there's another activity that's more conducive to building friendships and relationships with family and kids than that. Hunting and fishing. It's the most incredible arena. You put a kid in a 16-foot boat, he ain't going anywhere but 16 feet. You got him. And, you make it fun and adventurous, and same thing with a deer blind or a turkey blind. And eventually it all goes right one day, and you look there and you see that switch go off in their head. And it's like me catching that tarpon behind that school. They're going to go, I'm going to do this again. And I get to see that in Hayden and Wyatt and Colton and Tanner and all four of those boys. And they've all sat in my lap and killed a turkey.
That's probably my earliest memory with you.
Yeah. I remember that turkey. I remember where we were. I could go right back there today.
Me too. And I was probably 7.
You tripped over a cypress knee going into the place and you started crying. And I remember saying, there's no crying in turkey hunting. Get up. Do you remember that? Yeah. And the turkey came in and he had a BB gun. And I shot the turkey. Yeah, you did. I shot the turkey and he rolls over and he's flopping. And I said, go over and finish him off. And he goes, chink,
I probably shot it 20 times.
That poor
I
turkey.
shot it the same amount of times a shell emits.
That poor turkey died a slow death with BBs. But we dragged him out of there. He weighed 10 more pounds than he would have. And then we brought him back, and I thought, okay, I've created a monster. And sure enough, but that's the way it is with these kids. And man, to see that through their eyes again, that's pretty cool.
I don't doubt it at all.
Yeah.
Now from here, I want to start back at when you had the heart attack. I want you to kind of run me through the whole process of how you got inspired to make the book, and don't be afraid to spare details. Like, take the longest story possible here.
Well, I think from the heart attack thing, and I think it was an incredible gift, actually, because A was that I got through it without any heart damage, and I realized at that point that I wasn't, and I wasn't bulletproof. I figured at that age I was pretty much invincible, and it was a kind of an awakening. But the most incredible thing was that during the heart attack and after that, where they put in some stents, they discovered that I had a faulty heart valve. And I mean, how would you know that? If they're not going to run a camera down there, how would you ever know that you had a bicuspid heart valve? And they said, this is something we need to watch. And so over the next 12, 15 years, that's what we did. Every 4 to 6 months, they started watching it. And sure enough, it went south. And when it did, the surgeon said you'd have been dead mid-step if you hadn't had that heart attack and hadn't paid attention to it and watched it. So it was absolutely a gift from God, that happened. And so I don't look at it as a negative, and it was a positive experience. And so one that I wrote down 25 dreams that first night in the hospital, and things that I was going to go do. And I figured that I would take a year off and do those 25 things. It took 17 years, but I got them all done.
Do you still have that list?
I'm sorry?
Do you still have that list?
No, I don't. But I did every one of them. I wanted to write a book,
Which we'll get to here in a minute.
I wanted to build a boat,
Which we'll also get to here in a minute.
hanging off the
It's
back
behind
here.
me.
And I wanted to meet Lefty Cray. I wanted to catch a 200-pound tarpon on 16. I wanted to set the 6-pound record. And it went on and on. And so at the end of it all, while I didn't do everything on the list quite the way I wanted to, I did it in a way that it kind of turned out fine with me. I guess at the end of it all, I discovered that it was a foolish dream of mine to catch a fish, a 200-pound fish on 16. In a sense, it was a young man's dream. Somewhere along the line, I figured out that it wasn't the fish, it was the journey. Because without that dream to go do that, I wouldn't have paid the price that I paid to meet all the people I met and have all the friends that I met and have all the experiences that I had, fueled by a desire to catch a 200-pound tarpon on a fly. And so I came out of that, I thought, on the positive side of it, don't get me wrong. I still have this desire once in a while. I get in bed and I think, I can just envision that 200-pound target.
I can do it.
I can do this. Well, I'm not that old. I can still do it. Tom Evans did it. Hell, if he can, I can. And so, I'm just saying it was cool though. But I wouldn't trade anything for it. For that, all the people I met and all the times that we had.
Run me through meeting Lefty, and then obviously that leads into the book.
Well, Flip made that possible. I had a fish camp over on the lagoon. My wife and I bought this place and fixed it up, and it was great. It was incredible. It was right on the water, and not so much, was it? It wasn't highbrow at all. It was really neat. But she took it and converted it into the coolest place on the planet inside. And I back then, nobody was so much concerned about playing by the rules. You put as many boat slips in there as you wanted to, and so we really had it decked out. And so Flip and I fished there quite a bit, hung out there a lot, and so I told him I wanted to meet Lefty. That was on my list. And he was very involved in that list. I talked to him more than anyone else about it other than my wife. And by the way, she was so supportive of that challenge. Somewhere in all of there in 2000, we sold our company. And the night that it closed, it was like 2 a.m. We had some snag. And I remember calling her and saying, pack a bag. I got to get out of here. Because I was a workaholic. I worked like crazy. I didn't know when to stop. And we took off in a convertible that we had heading north. And she said, where are we going? I said, I don't know. We're going somewhere. And she said, we've never been to the Keys. If you can imagine, growing up in Florida, I'd never been to the Keys. And I spun the car around and we went to the Keys. Checked into the Chica Lodge. And what a trip that was. It was exciting. And it was a whole different world. But I never knew when to take a vacation. We were in the office furnishings business. So did you take a break when the business was going well? No. No, if business was good, you couldn't take a vacation. Maybe you did it when it was bad. No, you didn't do it when it was bad. You needed business. So I would go, I just worked. So I was pretty pinned up, and then when we sold the company, and I felt like O.J. Simpson. I was guilty, but I was free. So I bounced off the walls. You might want to cut that out.
I ain't cutting shit out.
Well, he's a big guy. Well, he might. So anyway, moving on. I decided that we needed to buy a big boat, and bought a 54 Hatteras, which was on my list to own and learn how to run and operate a big boat. Yeah, that was fun. You're right. That was a really
big ladyfish.
Oh my gosh. So we bought this thing, and my wife and I were standing on the dock, and she said, what do we do now? And I said, hell, I don't know how to start it. She said, really? I said, no, I don't know either. So I hired this captain named John Huff, and he taught me how to run the boat, and over a period of months, and finally I got my walking papers, and we took off. And you talk about an adventure. It was wild. So somewhere in all of that, I met Lefty, because Flip brought him there
To the camp.
to the fish camp. Yeah. And we were able, I want to say that at that time, Lefty had never seen a screw down tarpon. He just never had experienced that. And you familiar with what I'm saying?
Absolutely not.
Okay, well, there in that 7 feet of water, the poons would come up and roll.
Mm-hmm.
And if they rolled flat and didn't arc their back at the roll, but they had a tail kick at the very end of it, and those tarpon would corkscrew down right underneath the roll, right under it, and blow air bubbles.
Mm-hmm.
And if there was 2 tarpon that rolled, one big one and one small one, you threw the fly at the bigger air bubbles. It was that simple. Took me a while to
seems pretty easy.
Took me a long time to figure that out. And boy, we started lighting those tarpon up. And Flip came there, and we were just having a big heyday. Jumping tarpon in a non-tarpon fishery. That's the key to that. I mean, the Keys is a glory fishing place. Flamingo, glory. Homosassa, it's a glory hole. Mesquite Lagoon, not so much. And there's not the sheer numbers of fish in the Mesquite Lagoon or in Melbourne or in any of these fisheries, but it worked there, and it was consistent because of the way the fish worked, screwing down like that. So Flip said, we got to get Lefty here. And I think he came down there maybe 2 or 3 years. In fact, I was there with Flip when Lefty caught his last tarpon. And it was quite an event. And in fact, I grabbed that fish when it was still green. Flip said, grab that fish. I grabbed him. He came up, hit the bridge of my nose or over my brow one, and cut me. And I remember looking up at Lefty, and he goes, oh my God, you're bleeding. I said, and I had to let the fish go. I landed back on the floor, and we brought the fish up and got the picture, and Sam Tallarica was there, and it was quite a thing. It was pretty cool. And so meeting him was incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Just the man was such a powerful fellow, and he was a teacher and just a heck of a guy who really was a mentor. He would say things like, you can't make your candle burn brighter by blowing somebody else's out. In other words, stay humble. Always try to help somebody get their way along in this sport. And so that's where, between Flip and Lefty, that's kind of where I got into the meat of this sport, was that kind of attention to detail, courtesy on the water, slowing down and being thoughtful on the water. And that doesn't come easy because you're pretty cranked up. If I had to say today, did you know that we have over 1 million registered boats right now in the state of Florida?
Mm-mm.
Over 1 million. Think about that number. It's incredible. Now, there's people running around out there that don't have any clue what they're doing, But if they run over you, the fact that they don't know what they're doing doesn't change the end result.
Mm-hmm.
They run over your fish. Hayden, you were just down in the Keys. And in every one of these fisheries, Andre, there's a code of conduct.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the same code of conduct in every fishery. It varies because the fish do different things in different fisheries. Homosassa, the rule was if you can tell what color a boat is, you're too close if your engine's running.
Well, now you don't know if their fish are coming north or south.
That's right. That's right. So, you know, a lot of young anglers go, say, to the Keys, and their hope is to make a name for himself in the fly fishing world.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a bad thing to want. That's fine. So they pull into the boat ramp and then decide to put their rods in the boat while everybody else is lined up trying to put their boat in there at the Lorelei. And finally they get that done and they go out and run down a flat. And a half a mile away or quarter of a mile away, there's boats poling the flat. Well, they've made a name for themselves, so they're not going to like that name. They're in a lot of trouble.
Mm-hmm.
But it's lack of knowledge in most cases. Some cases it's intentional, but other cases, and if you can give anybody an advice, the advice is to work your way into a fishing community the right way.
Mm-hmm.
Go to the fly shop and talk to, if you're going to fish here, go talk to Nathan
Mm-hmm.
and ask him, say, where do we go and what do we do? And
Where do we go, Nathan?
without messing somebody up, or go to Sandy Moret down in the Keys and say, I'm new here, and hire a guide. Hire a guide and ask the guide, now why did you swing way around and begin to understand what the code of conduct is in that fishery? Don't, after the guide takes you out, don't go back to where he took you. That's the cardinal sin. You don't do that.
Yep.
And, but it's just like joining any community. It's very tender. It's very careful. And don't ask people where they catch their tarpon. You know what? If they tell you, you can't go back there.
Yep.
Because that's rude. And it's shunned upon. So find them on your own. And that's half the battle. You've taken something away from somebody if you tell them exactly where to go and exactly what to fish with and what to do.
Mm-hmm.
You've stolen something from them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the joy of finding it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right. Sailboat. Tell that story.
Last year when we were in, where were we in? Marco Island.
Yeah.
You can call that microphone a little closer. Yeah.
So we were in Marco Island. What was it? A tourist sailboat?
Yeah, it was.
Man, this guy, we were sitting out on the beach waiting for fish to swim through, and they just had started swimming through. It was on a tide that I won't say, but it was on a good tide, and the tide had just switched, and these fish were pushing exactly down the line that we were anchored on, and we anchor because I'm lazy, Poon's old. We can't push full all the time. So we anchor, and we're anchored on this spot.
It was deep water. You can't pull it deep water.
Man, it was deep. But yeah, we were anchored, and Poon was like, these fish are going to do this at this time, and that's what they're going to do. And sure enough, that's what they did. And man, we had maybe 3 great shots. We had been waiting out there. We get there 2 hours before the tide because, we're going to be the first to spot. We don't got anything to do the rest of the day. So we're going to get there. We're going to make sure we're in the spot. Not saying that's right or wrong, but we were there. Fish started swimming. sure enough, as soon as we get 2 shots deep, we get a sailboat guy. We see this sailboat guy coming in from 5 miles away. I mean, we see him way out, and we don't think anything of it because, he's a sailboat out in the ocean. And we're like, oh, yeah, sure enough, he's going to come down this way with his crew, and he'll leave, and he'll come by, and he'll wave.
And his crew is 30 people.
His crew's 30 people. And sure enough, he gets closer and closer and closer, and I'm like, Poon, what is this sailboat doing? And sure enough, this sailboat gets literally, I'm in I think our skiff, and then you're in your skiff.
Right.
And we're sat up like 50 yards from each other.
Yeah.
I could cast you.
Yeah.
We're set up maybe 40 yards from each other just because we want to see each other jump fish.
Right, yeah.
And this sailboat shoots the gap between us. Kid you not, this is a gap that you could throw a fly line in between my boat to Poon's boat.
You couldn't cuss a cat without having a mouthful of fur. That guy was right on top of it.
And this sailboat goes right down the middle of our chute. And we have fish swimming, keep in mind. I'm pretty sure we had a shot literally 30 seconds before this.
Absolutely.
And we are like, what are you doing? Throwing our hands up, all this and that. Some words that we will not name on here started getting thrown around. And he's like, this is my beach. And Poon gets
the
hot.
fuck outta here.
And I don't see Poon get hot very often, but Poon gets hot. And we're like, your beach? He's like, I've been coming to this beach every freaking time, every day. And he's got 30 people on his boat.
They're all very white.
Very
They
white.
haven't had any sun.
And they're out there swimming around. Very
pale.
They're out there on the sandbar, on the second bar, right where the tarpon are swimming, kid you not. And so we pull the old, there's a big ass shark here. But, they're not buying it. That joke's been thrown out too many times. And sure enough, they did their thing. They anchored up right where we were. We got pissed. Eventually, I think they moved.
They did.
But then on the way back, we called the freaking.
We learned that the boat was part of a fleet of boats
Oh,
owned
nice.
by a company, and so we called the owners. And I called the owner, and I said, "Here's what happened." And she said, "Oh my gosh!" And I said, "Do you like to fish?" And she said, "Oh, we fish all the time." And I said, "Well, let me lay this out for you." So I don't know what happened, but we never saw him again.
No.
He never came
He
around.
was new.
Yeah, he was new. That's right. They just hired him.
We told him to fire him.
Yeah, that's what we said. So anyway, but no, it's you get to the point in one fishery that you fell in love with, and you watch it overrun with people, and it's not just pontoon boats and jet skis and all those things that are testing enough, but sometimes it's anglers and other anglers. And I remember my first trip to Boca Grande, which we ultimately bought a place there. And unknowingly, I cut a guy off. I didn't know which way the fish were swimming. I had no idea. So I idled in and dropped an anchor to post up. And boy, this guy turned loose on me. And I knew enough to know that, okay, I had no way of knowing. So I called Tommy Locke. He was living there. And I told him what had happened. He said, "Well, you cut his fish off." And I said, "What?" I had no idea. I said, "Do you have his name and number?" And he gave me his phone number, and I called him. It's like 10 o'clock at night. And I told him, I said, "I'm the guy that cut you off today, and I'm sorry, I didn't know." He said, "What, are you crazy?" And I said, No, I'm apologizing. I'm new here, and I don't want to get off on the wrong foot. And he and I became friends.
What's his name?
I can't remember. Not that good a friend. I can't remember your name, Bob.
All right.
But it was cool because he fished with his wife and he was a live bait guy.
Uh-huh.
And but but we'd see each other on the water and wave to each other, and it was great. But I think if there was a way to put a book together, and I've thought about this, that each fishery has its own kind of thing, to where you could emphasize courtesy on the water between anglers. Like I said, a lot of people don't know. And if there was a way they did know, I think they might do things a little different.
Are you familiar with a project called Flatsworthy?
No.
So Flatsworthy was started by Chuck Nizer over at Rockport, mostly because of the airboats getting really bad, running over a bunch of like the islands and the marshes in that area. And the whole slogan is diverse anglers, mutual respect. Very, very similar to what you were talking about here. And I think that I mean, you see it sort of here with like literally here with captains of clear water and stuff. And you see it also in Texas and stuff like that. So I'm 100% on your side on this one.
You know, it's funny. You go to all the work to get set up and get there and post up, and just where you know that little crook in the bar is, and you know what the fish are going to do, and you know they're going to swing out before they come back in again. And somebody comes in there and just crashes your deal. I remember this like it was yesterday. I remember after I got out of the hospital, and my heart doctor said, you need to gear back. You're a little revved up. I said, well, it's my nature. And he goes, yeah, you need to take it easy and enjoy yourself. Fishing is a very relaxing sport. And I said, you don't know anything about tarpon fishing. That's not relaxing at all. And but I took what he said to heart, and I went over to the lagoon by myself and set up, and it wasn't long before I look out there and I see this boat, and it's coming on a hostile vector. It's coming straight at me. And I'm going, all right, take it easy.
Slow down.
Take a deep breath. It's going to be okay. Don't go crazy. And they went within like 30 yards of me. I mean, you got so much water, you could have gone anywhere. And I remember seeing this little kid sitting on an ice chest in front of the console as they went by. And I mean, I just, I want to do something. I want to do something drastic. And all I did was shrug my shoulders and put my hands up in the air. And they go by, and he spins around. I never forget this. And he idled back, and he said, do you have a problem? And I went, I can't believe this. I mean, that's the mildest I've ever been. I've done a lot of crazy stuff. And I said, I can't believe this. And he goes, you can't believe what? And I said, all I did was shrug my shoulders, and you want to know now, have you got a problem? And he goes, oh, no, that's not what I meant. I thought maybe you were broken down or something. And I stood there and I looked at him and I said, oh, you mean, do I have a problem? Like a problem? He said, well, maybe your motor's broken down. I go, oh, wait a minute. I said, listen, I had a heart attack and I've had some problems and I'm out here. The more I try to explain this, the little kid's sitting there looking at me like, what in the world? And I said, oh, never mind. I said, just have a nice day.
I'm sorry for fishing here.
Yeah, he was glad to leave. And I sat down and I went, that didn't go well at all. But the whole experiment, it taught me something, and that is, all you got to do is make them stop and come back, so. But if we could solve that problem a little bit, just make a dent in it by getting people to understand. It's almost like in every fly shop, there should be a list of things posted on the wall that says this. to this fishery. There used to be a saying in one of the fisheries, I won't name which one, that you know, when a boat does something offensive, you don't know the person driving the boat, but you know the boat, right? It's imprinted in your brain. There was a saying that said every boat has a drain plug. and when you broke a rule at Homosassa, it was over the top. I mean, I saw some stuff there. It was crazy. And, you know, what was it? Why can't we all just get along? It's maybe it's a way to raise the awareness, you know, button just a little bit to where people can go a little slower and be a little more courteous. You're not going to stop the pontoon boat and the jet ski. I mean, that's not going to happen but they have as much right to be on the water as we do.
I don't disagree. One thing that I want to point is we completely segued and forgot to talk about high rollers.
Oh, we certainly did. Wow, I'm glad you reminded me of that. Well, it was Lefty. I was illustrating his books.
How did you get that? How did you make that happen?
I don't know. I think maybe it was Flip saying to Lefty that I had you know, the ability to do that, and I loved painting and loved illustrating and loved drawing as a kid. Always, if I could see something, I could draw it. And so, you know, I guess it became easy for me. And so he came to me and he said, would you be interested in illustrating, you know, some books? And I said, yes. And that was the coolest thing in the world, because the idea of something that I drew being published was just beyond my comprehension, you know. So I'd do the illustrations, and of course the book would get published because Lefty was writing it. And to see those in print was really rewarding. It was really cool. And I didn't want to get paid for it. I would have paid to do it, to be honest. And because it was a vehicle that I got to know him. And so, you know, it goes back to mentoring. And he just had such an influence on me through that period of time where he would call me and say, you know, I'm doing another book. I remember one specifically. He called me up. He said, I'm doing another book. And I said, oh, great. He said, would you illustrate it? And I said, sure. What is the book about? He said, well, the book is the 101 best fish I've ever caught on fly. And I went, wait a minute. You don't want me to illustrate 101 fish, do you? He said, I do. I said, oh, good Lord. And these were fish I knew nothing about. You understand? It wasn't like snook or trout or redfish. It was like barramundi or something, you know, from some island somewhere. And, but I did that. And then the next book was a knot book. I couldn't think of anything less exciting to draw than knots. But it was incredible because it was him. And so, you know, that relationship, because of Flip, turned out to be such an important thing. I learned so much from him, and he was a wonderful guy. He was incredible.
How did you get the opportunity to put out high rollers?
He came to me and wanted me to do that. He said, I want you to write a book about tarpon fishing. And I knew nothing about publishing a book. I knew nothing about writing a book. I had tried to write one thing, and I'd sent it to, I can't remember who I sent it to. And I wish I did right now, but I can't remember. But he came back and he said, I'm going to give you a piece of advice. Write like you talk. Then you can always be that same person. And don't tell me that the moon is shining on the water. He said, take me to the place where the moon is shimmering on the water. In other words, get to a point where it's more intriguing, but write like you talk. And Nick Lyons, that's who it was, Nick Lyons. And it was incredible that he did that. So I would just put down things on paper the way I would say them. And it worked. I mean, I didn't write Harry Potter, you know. I wish I had. And I've never thought of myself as really an author, but just somebody that likes to write. And in the art part of it, I've never thought of myself as an artist or part of the art community. I have no desire to do that. I'm a guy that loves to fish. And along the way, I paint. Instead of a painter who likes to fish. If that makes any sense.
Makes total sense.
And my art critic is that guy that's caught 1,000 snook and looks at a snook painting and goes, I'm going to buy that. Because it passed his test and not some hayseed that doesn't know what a snook looks like, you know, because of the background or something.
Yeah.
I could care less about that. And so I remember I entered one art show and I took second place, I think, in the art show in Orlando. And they came to me to interview me and they said, who's your favorite artist? And I said, Guy Harvey. And they said, who is that? And I said, well, he does T-shirts. And I thought they were going to take their award back. You know? And but what a great artist he is. Yeah. And so, yeah, I everything to me starts with fishing or hunting and then goes on from there. I mean,
I like that you mentioned, nice. I like that you mentioned the fact that your biggest critic was someone who had seen a snook 1,000 times, essentially. When I spoke to Larry Haynes, who is a pretty well-renowned South Texan artist, he talked about getting to a point where his goal was to paint with light, so much so that he had people who were bird watchers and bird photographers look at his art and not even know if it was actually an image or not.
Right.
Because that was his audience. It wasn't everybody else.
You take a guy who doesn't give a crap about art.
Yeah.
He has no idea about anything with art, color, whatever, contrast. But he sees that snook and he's filleted those snooks since he was a kid, put his hands on them, knows every detail of them, filleted them out. That's the guy. That's the art critic. That's the guy that looks at that snook and goes, that's a snook. And that's a redfish. And that's a speckled trout. And that's a permit. And that's a bonefish or a tarpon. And that's the person that I know that painting's going to go home, hang on that person's wall, and it's going to mean something. It's like sculpting. I got this crazy idea that I could sculpt. So I bought a book called From Clay to Bronze. And I read it and I thought, I can do that. And you start out with a a clay rendition of what you want. It's called Lost Wax. Had no idea what I was doing, but I had just got caught up with it because unlike painting in a sculpture, you don't have contrast and you don't have a background. You don't have water. You don't have any of that stuff. You got this thing standing there that's based on shape and form. That's it. It's got to stand there by itself. And so I did it. And then I thought, well, this is crazy, you know? I mean, I don't even know what I'm doing. Well, what I noticed was that unlike art, you know, where you paint it, that people would come up to it and they put their hands on it and they'd feel it. And they didn't ever do that with a painting, but they were really, really into it. You know, running their hands down the scales. And I thought, wow, this is pretty cool. And when all those prints and originals are dried up and that 30-pound sculpture is going to be a boat anchor, but it's going to be there, you know. It's going to be there for eternity. I mean, what's it going to be?
Yeah.
And that's where it became important to me to do that. And so in everything that I got involved in, there was a bit of art form to it, like building a wooden boat.
Which I was actually about to segue into, so.
Well, the boat was a piece of art.
What was the process like?
Well, I met a guy years ago when I was in high school, Bud DeWeese. He lived in Oak Hill, and he was a boat builder. He built all the commercial boats and like the old Courtneys, you know, that I spoke about in Inglewood. And they were net boats. But when he built a boat for himself, he built this incredible row skiff with 1/4-inch sides out of Douglas fir and a 1/2-inch bottom. And so I went to him, and he called me dumbass. That was my name. Because he had this trailer that he rented he was on the water in the lagoon, and I rented the trailer, and my buddy of mine and I, Bill Rashoy, would go over there and we'd pay like $3 or something to stay in this rat's nest. And, but it had a gas stove. Well, I didn't know anything about a gas stove. And I turned the gas on, and then I didn't have any matches. So I went to his office, got some matches, came back, went in the trailer, turned it on, and blew the trailer up and blew me out in the parking lot. And fire department came. It's the only fire they'd had all year. They were all very excited about it. And so he never got mad at me. He just called me dumbass. And so I went to him and I asked him to show me how to build a boat, flat bottom wood scuff, like I'd grown up with in Inglewood. And he did. And he told me how to build it. And no plans or anything. He said, this is what you do. Build it upside down and use Monel 1020 ring nails. And that's what I did. I drew the plans, but I drew the plans like you would draw a snook. And I envisioned this boat to have a high, proud bow and come down in thin lines at the back. And, you know, it was just a piece of art. So I built it. And when I got it done, my son stopped and he goes, it looks like a boat. I said, it is a boat, you know. And I remember he and Cecil Goodrich, they were the senior guys, you know, back in Oak Hill in those days. And Cecil told me, he said, now, you got this boat, this wood boat. And he said, what you got to remember is that wood boats got to be wet. He said, you can't put this in your garage and leave it dry because it'll get dry rot. So he said, but a wood boat ain't that smart. And it doesn't know whether it's supposed to be in the water or have the water in it. So if you're not going to take it out, put the plug in it and fill it up with water because it's got a swell.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, what we do here during mullet season is we run our boats, and in the non-season, we fill it up with water. We grow tropical fish in it and sell them at the pet stores. So they used it as an aquarium. So, I'd pull the thing out in the driveway and fill it up with water, and it'd leak for about 15 minutes and it quit. There's nothing like a wood boat. Alan Jackson sang that song. Ain't nothing like a wood boat rides. You remember that song? And he's right. I mean, I took this little boat and put it on the back, built a hydraulic lift for it. I can't sell the boat. I built that boat 25 years ago. I can't sell it. Hayden, if I sell that boat, it'll start talking, I'll go to prison. I've had that boat for a long time, and it's just a wonderful boat. And so everywhere I go now in this boat, the big boat, it goes with me. And I'll drop it in the water. I row it. I don't pole anymore. I'm not getting up on top of that platform anymore. But I'll row it.
Like one of these crew guys.
Yeah, like the crew guys around here. I'll row it, and it's old school. And it works great. It's incredible rowing around for tarpon. It's great fun. Nathan and I are going to go tarpon fishing in that boat, aren't we? Yeah. Pretty special.
Yeah.
So.
I wanna go back to the list that you wrote when you were in the hospital. You mentioned having the 6-pound record. Yeah. That might be something that that was if you had to say one story with Flip, that would be the story. You skipped out on me on that when I asked you earlier. Huh? You skipped out on me on that when I asked you earlier. Well, I got it in my head I wanted to do that. And so I lit off this thing like I do with everything, go bat crap crazy, and they didn't have a wide gap, a hook back then that you could make work with tarpon. So I took it just come out with circle hooks. So I came up with the circle hook, clipped the barb off and fashioned a chisel point on it. And then Lefty told me, Lefty wasn't so much for the 6-pound deal. He thought that it put too much stress on the tarpon, and he may have been right. He was right about everything else. I don't know why he'd be wrong about that. But it didn't deter me. I was still, going for it. And he said, well, if you're going to do it, turn 100-pound biminis on your class tippet. 100-pound biminis or 100 turn? 100 turn biminis. For all that stretch. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. And he said, you got to do that. So I tried that. My wrist just about gave out. Yeah. So I started doing it with a electric drill. Yeah. That's so smart. There was a point where I started using 2-pound. Well, yeah, before I get all that credit, Tommy was doing it with a manual drill. Remember the little manual drills that you... So you still do it, though, with the electric. Yeah, I still do it with the electric drill. And so we got that... I got that going, and so I went out there, and it never did work. I mean, I'd hook a fish, and I'd go to set it, and it'd break, or the fish would run out there, turn left to right, and break off, towing the fly line. And so it got crazy. And then one morning, it all went well. And it was a fish, I guess, 115, 120. Mm-hmm. And I got into it. I got past that miracle moment, Yeah. And started the engine, and I'm following this fish with a tiller, and
I called Flip. I said, where are you? And he said, I'm on my way to the post office. And I said, not anymore, you're not. You need to come help me with this fish. So he comes over to this dock, and these boys bring him out to where I am in the lagoon. And he gets on the boat, and he's like, battle, we're going to catch this thing. And that started it. And we went on through the day, and lightning storms came through, and we just kept going. It was actually refreshing. And got dark, got into the night, and the bioluminescence was so bright in the water. Every move that tarpon made in front of the boat, Flip was running the boat, I was fighting the fish. You could see every detail on that fish.
Really?
Yeah, and we're steaming north, got out of the lagoon, got in the ICW, heading up towards New Smyrna. And I don't know, I guess it was 1:32 in the morning. And I hooked that fish at 9 o'clock that morning. And so we were closing in on 16 hours.
Jesus Christ.
I know. But you got to be doing something for 16 hours.
Yeah.
And you're not worn out because you're pulling on 6 pound. How hard can you pull?
Honestly,
right?
that's true.
So all you got to do is stand up, really. And my son came over with his boat. And there was another guide over there in the lagoon who came out and joined us. And boy, it got crazy. It was fun. It was like a party. And Scott Tripp. They set up a little bar because they were back there following us. So they were mixing drinks. And I said, somebody fix me a drink. They said, no, you're not getting a drink. So it was really fun because it just went on and on and on, and all the camaraderie and fellowship and fun. And I looked out there at one point when it got real quiet, and I could see fireworks on the horizon. And I said, Flip, look at the fireworks. Well, this is like a Wednesday night, It's not July, and it's not the 4th. And he said, fireworks? There's no fireworks, dude. It's just like Wednesday. And I go, there's fireworks. Strangest thing, it was 3 porpoise coming at us, blowing that fire water, I call it, bioluminescence,
Yeah.
out of their blowholes.
Huh.
And the water would go up and spread out just like a Roman candle, And he goes, why? And he was looking at it, couldn't figure it out. And he goes, porpoise. And I said, what's porpoise? They're fireworks. He said, they're not fireworks. It's porpoise. It was the eeriest thing. You think back, I've never seen that before, never seen it since. But those porpoise came in, turned around, and flanked that tarpon on either side. And they were going over and under the tarpon. And I said, Flip, they're going to break the leader. And he said, porpoise don't run into things accidentally. Don't worry about that. And in short order, after about 15, 20 minutes, I guess, the porpoise peeled off that tarpon and went by the boat. One of them heeled up on its side and looked at me, and I looked down at it, and I thought, that's the most amazing thing, the relationship between, and I had seen that connection with tarpon and porpoise before. I'd seen it in Boca Grande on a seahorse hatch where they were out there feeding shoulder to shoulder together. So I knew there was some coordination between them. And they went past me, and that tarpon spun around and followed them. He spins the boat around. Now we're going back where we came from. And peeling off line and big explosion in the water. And it lit up like New York City. I mean, it was just this big ball of light, like somebody throwing a car in the water. And line went slack. And Flip goes, you know what happened there? And I said, I do. I said, those porpoise broke that fish off.
Mm.
Now, I'll go to my grave saying that.
Mm.
No question about it. There's no doubt about it whatsoever. They broke that tarpon off. And we're not prone to believe in Goodnight John Boy and all the animals in the woods, they communicate with you. We're not prone
Ace
to
Ventura.
believe. Yeah, you don't believe it. Flip had a name for that. It was some scientific name. And you talk about being tired. We were both tired. So I went home, and Flip went home and wrote a story called The Longest Day and Night, wound up being published.
Hmm.
And I went home because I was supposed to take my wife to the airport with my daughter, his mother, my grandson's mother. And I got in bed and she said, did you catch him? And I said, no. And she said, well, I'm proud of you. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
I woke up.
Shout out JJ.
Yeah. Shout out to JJ. Always been supportive of me in my dreams. And got up the next morning. There's a note on the pillow. They called a taxi to the airport. So I go, okay. Hell, I'm going back fishing to the river. And so I jumped in the car, went back over, and got in my skiff and went about 200 yards and ran out of gas. Came back, went to bed for 2 days. So, but that's my Flip story, and but that's him. He's always all in. All in.
So we're at the hour and 25-minute mark. I wanted to see if you would be open to tell the story you told me upstairs about you flipping lefty and getting a checkup.
Oh my God, that was the colonoscopy story.
You brought it up. You already said it. You have to
Lefty
finish
said,
it.
have you guys had your colonoscopies? And I'd had one, I think, but Flip hadn't. And so he left, and Flip goes, we got to get colonoscopies. I said, well, he's not going to remember that. And he goes, oh, he will. So we went and got these colonoscopies. And we decided we were going to buy 2 pickup trucks after we got out of the procedure. And so we did 2 black 250s diesels. Mm-hmm. Carried our airboats down to the Everglades and ran like hell over the Everglades with our boats. And, I guess reality is kicking in. Last year, Flip and I were down at our hunting place, which is close to here, as I told you. Mm-hmm. And I'd roosted a really nice gobbler. And I said to Flip, let's go shoot that gobbler in the morning. And he said, all right, yeah. Paddle, I'm going to go kill that turkey. And we got up the next morning before daybreak. We go down there and we get out to where the turkey's roosted. And I said, right here, we'll build this little blind. We stood up some palmettos. And turkey's gobbling off the roost like crazy. And he's a great caller, Flip is. And so we were doubling up, calling on the bird. And Flip says to me, he said, now, when that turkey comes in here, you're going to shoot him. And I said, oh, I'm not going to shoot the turkey. No, I left my gun in the buggy. He said, why'd you do that? And I said, because you're going to shoot the turkey. He said, why don't you shoot it? And I said, I'm just not pissed off at him. I don't want to shoot him. And Flip looks at the turkey for a while and he goes, I don't want to shoot him either. I said, well, what do we do? And he goes, pancakes. I said, pancakes? What's pancakes? He said, let's go back to camp and cook some pancakes. We gathered ourselves up, went back to the buggy, and went back and ate some pancakes. I said, I remember.
I'll shoot him.
Yeah, you'd shoot him. I said, I remember when we'd arm wrestled to see who was going to kill that turkey. And he said, not anymore. He said, we had a good hunt, though. It was kind of cool, We don't have to kill him. So
It's funny that you say that story. When I did an episode with Craig Oatman, he mentioned that his dad was a very good public land elk hunter, and that towards the end of his hunting career, one of the last things that he remembers was that he had his dad go over a ridge, and he didn't really know what was going on, and all of a sudden he hears his dad go like, "Bam! Like I could have got you." And his whole thing was,
Yeah.
like, I fooled you, but
Yeah.
at no point do I need to take you
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah. I think maybe I haven't shot a deer in a long time, and it's kind of like, I hate to use this analogy. I guess it's all right. It's kind of like that 90-year-old guy that goes to the doctor, and the doctor goes, "What's the problem?" And the guy goes, "I can't pee." And the doctor goes, "How old are you?" And he said, 90. And the doctor says, "You've peed enough." You get to a point
You're
where
done.
I think you just get to the point where you don't have to do it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that's good for me. I saw a turkey run him ragged this year.
Yeah.
Ran him down to a nub, and
Last day.
last day of the season, this turkey had gotten his goat, and he just couldn't kill it. And he say he'd text me or he'd call me, and he said, "This thing's 50 yards away. I'm gonna kill him.
Yeah.
And then 30 minutes would go by, and I'm waiting for a gunshot, and I go, "That didn't work out." And then he'd call me that son of a gun, and he'd be all mad at him. And then the last morning, he killed him, and I'm like,
Yeah.
"Thank you, Jesus."
Yeah.
This is like
Me too.
the coolest thing ever. But it's that way. I wake up down there, and I've got 4 of my best friends plus my son and my family. My wife is there,
Cooks
and
the
my
best
daughter's.
breakfast every morning.
Yeah, she does. JJ cooks. She got a sign in the outdoor kitchen out there that says JJ's Pancake House.
Never had a
And,
breakfast till you had a JJ breakfast.
Yeah, that's right. So it's really cool. So I got to tell you, man, if I die tonight, I'm going to come back as me. I got the best. I got the best of it. It doesn't get any better than what I got.
One story I want you to tell is that story of the first poon we ever hooked together.
Oh, good
That
Lord.
fish on horseshoe when I dropped the rod in the water and he stood down in your underwear.
I need context.
I want you to tell that story.
Well, I can't remember that story.
Uh-oh.
I got undressed. Oh, good Lord.
Boy, yeah,
Did I?
yeah.
I can't remember that. I do remember. Taking my clothes off at one time when that guy got too close
Yeah.
down there in the lagoon, and they went away really fast.
Is that what you were getting at earlier? Tell that story.
Oh well, I just.
In graphic, vivid detail.
Oh Lord. Well, the boat came in there really close, and they threw their anchor out in the water like it was an Olympic event. How far you can throw the anchor, and perturbed me a little bit.
I like that word.
So I'd tried everything. My great friend
Big shark.
Pat Fulford and I, and we even Pat Fulford and I, who is a dear friend, I love him to death. We even took the engine off of the cowling off and put it on top of the platform like we were broken down, because we figured people would go by us and think what we thought. I'm going to swing wide so I don't have to drag them in. Yeah, I don't have to pull them in, And no, not of all of our people. They wanted to come up there and pull us in. And I thought, oh, good Lord, nothing's working. And they came out in this boat, and they had all the bumpers hanging off the side of the boat still. Yeah, and it was a pontoon boat. And somebody said, what are we fishing for? And they said, we're fishing for whatever he's fishing for. And I go, oh, you got to be kidding. And they were right on top of me. I don't know, it was an epiphany that I had to just take my clothes off. And so I did. And they're watching me, and And they said, what's going on? And I jumped in the water and I start dog paddling like I can't swim. And I'm going toward them. And they said, what are you doing? And I said, well, come over and see you fellas. And boy, they left in a hurry. And my daughter was some distance away. And time I got back to the dock, Janie came out on the dock and she said, I have to ask you, did you take your clothes off and attack a boat? And I said, well, I didn't attack. I was dog paddling, you know. And she said,
A rather aggressive actor.
yeah. And she said, what is that about? And I said, do you remember The Godfather, where he goes, she wanted to know if the Godfather had killed her husband. She said, please, just tell me this one time. He said, don't ask me about my business. And she says, just this one time, can I ask? And he goes, did you have my husband killed? And he said, no. And she was very happy after that. Of course he did. And she said, why would you do that? And I said, don't ask me about tarpon fishing. You just don't understand tarpon fishing. And so anyway, that's how crazy we got about people.
Hmm.
People running in on us. And,
Well, you don't remember that story of the first pin that we hooked together when I was probably 10, 11, and you jumped into your pants with your underwear?
Yeah, tell it, and then I'll close it out after.
So my earliest Poon memory with you, Poon, is we were on a bar in Boca Grande, and I don't say it now because I don't know, but it doesn't matter. But we hooked a big fish. You hooked a big fish, and you let me fight it, and I was probably 10, 11. I was really young, and I had my fly rod in the poling platform on the back of the boat. You had your fly rod in the bow, and you were casting at this fish, and sure enough, this big old pig ate, and we hooked up, and I got so damn excited, I dropped my fly rod in the water, and we had to chase this fish. This was a pig. This was a 140, 150 pound fish that we hooked in Boca Grande. And we picked up the anchor, or we dropped the buoy. I got so damn excited, I dropped my damn rod in the water. And I dropped my damn rod in the water, and we started chasing after this fish. And I was like, Poon, I dropped the water in the water. You're like, it doesn't matter, Bubba, get up here. Fight this fish. So I'm fighting this fish, and we fought this fish for probably like an hour and a half. I don't remember if we landed him or not.
I don't think it was that long.
I don't remember if we landed him or not, but it probably broke us off, and you're like, where'd the rod go? I'm like, oh shit, that's back at the buoy line. And you go, wait, what? And we get back to the anchor line, and you strip down in your underpants. And you go, I'm going to go find that rod. I'm like, the hell you're not. Sure enough, you come back up there 10 minutes later with the rod in your hand with that Gulf Stream.
Is that right?
Yeah, you don't remember that?
I think I remember parts of that.
Yeah. And that was my first tarpon I ever fought on fly rod. Was that story right there. And from that point on, I was hooked, because that fish jumped. I mean, she didn't jump a lot because she was a pig.
Mm-hmm.
And I the only reason I remember this is because I go, Poon, how big do you think that fish was? And whether or not you were lying, I don't know, but you were like, that fish was $150.
I think she probably was if I said that.
And I was like, dude, no way. That fish was $150. And that was a special moment for me, because right there, I was hooked on tarpon fishing. I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. That fish ran the Gulf of Mexico in freaking feet of water in seconds. And we were on a 4-foot bar. We had shots all day. We never got a fish to eat. That fish went berserk. And I was so excited, I dropped that damn fly rod in the water. And I was like, oh, yep, you know what? Fuck that fly rod. Let's go fight this fish.
You know what's cool?
Not knowing what the hell I was doing.
You know what's cool about this is that you get a chance.
You pass it over, Hayden?
to pass, you get a chance to pass what you love so much on to better hands than yours. And you watch them become so proficient at what they do. And you had some small part of that. And you know, at the end of the day, they're going to have that incredible life in that outdoor experience, whether it's hunting turkeys or whether it's fly fishing for tarpon. And that makes it all worth it. It really does. This isn't a sport. It's not a hobby. It's not a pastime. It's a way of life. And, you know, I mean, he told me tonight when we were sitting up there and standing up there in the pilot house, he said, I want to know everything about this boat. I want to know how to start it, how to back it out of here, and how to run it. And he said, I want to get totally familiar with running this 80,000 pounds around. And I said, well, let's get busy. Then we got that to do. And he'll do it. He'll do it. And so it's really cool. You spend one night down at that hunting camp on the porch with these boys and my son and JJ and all of that. And no way, you're hooked for life. It's part of it.
I'll say this too. I mean, there's not a lot of old Floridians these days that has brought so much to the table, you know, whether it's turkey hunting for Osceolas, whether it's deer hunting for giant Florida swamp bucks, whether it's fishing for these giant tarpon. I mean, you're the epitome of that. And I feel so fortunate to be able to learn from you day in and day out and, you know, just be a part of how you grow up, because we have so many people these days in Florida and, you know, people that come over and that they don't recognize the true history of what our state is about. And conservation is such an important topic these days that, you know, you kind of get lost in the sauce of people coming in and, you know, doing it because it's cool. But that's never once the reason why we did it. I mean, we did it because it was our way of life, and that's truly what is so impactful in my life is like, I couldn't see myself, you know, hunting turkeys and hunting these Osceolas and chasing these tarpon without you and teaching me that guidance. And it's just so hard to get into this sport without having the proper guidance, because like we said earlier, I mean, you could set up 250 yards to the south or north of these guys. You don't know where these fish are coming from. You don't know if you're getting in front of these guys or if you're getting behind these guys. And if you don't have the rite of passage, then it's super hard to get into the sport. And, you know, I mean, it should be like that. You should be putting your time in the water, and that's a forgotten skill these days. That's a forgotten art these days. And, you know, I'm super grateful to grow up around you and around the stuff that we do on a daily basis, because now it's, you know, impacted my life for the better. And, you know, you're only raising a generation of conservation, and from when I have kids and my kids' kids and that and so forth, like I've grown up around the greats, around Flip, around you, around Leo, around Lefty, around all these guys that truly know what they're doing. And a lot of people don't have that luxury. So I'm super grateful for that. And, you know, you've done an amazing job of instilling that, and not just me, but my cousins and my brothers and our whole entire Bishop clan. So I commend you for that entirely.
I haven't got anything left to say. I'm almost choked up.
You almost choked up? Well,
so
hey, just remember that give me that gold reel, that rookie.
I wanted to ask you to tell me one more story before we close it out. You actually answered already one of my ending questions earlier, so I'll only ask one. But the last question I have to ask you is I wanted to know the story behind that T-board prototype.
Oh, wow. You know, Flip had two of those. And somewhere along the line between teaching me how to whip line and how to find push-pull forks in the woods with shooting them out of the trees down the Everglades with shotguns and how to do all of that. And the guy's just a machine. We were in his garage one day and he picked up one of those reels and handed it to me and said, I want you to take this. And it's a treasure for me to have that. And I've had that reel on a bunch of different rods. And nowadays the rod that I fish with is that Hardy one piece. Yep. And you know, that rod is just a machine.
It is. I really like it a lot.
Yeah, but we started out with the J. Kennedy Fishers, and those were beasts. They were great rods, and so I've seen this sport evolve. I guess if I had to say one thing about this sport, and I think Nathan would agree with this if I said it, I used to play a little bit of golf. And when I'd shoot a decent round, I would come home and I'd say, I got this. I got this game. Mm-hmm. Well, I didn't have anything. I made a bunch of mistakes that turned out to be the right mistakes. But the next day I'd go out there and it was awful. So I quit golf. I really don't know 3 people I want to spend 4 hours with that play golf. So I can stop playing. But the fact is that this sport morphs. It evolves every year. It's different. The same fly that you used last year, you throw it in front of a tarpon the next year, and it's like yelling B-52 at an Iraqi bingo game. The tarpon head for parts unknown. It scares the hell out of them. So that's the neat thing about this sport, is that you never got it. I don't care who you are. Andy Mill will tell you the same thing. Mm-hmm. And you can't be as good as your predecessors. You never will be that. You got to be better. Every year, no matter how old you get, you've got to be better the next year. And who was it? Toby Keith that sang Don't Let the Old Man In? Best way to keep him out of there is take up fly fishing for tarpon. You know, because you want to stay in the game. And every year you've got to reinvent it and go back out there and do it better than you did the year before. Otherwise, you're just wasting your time. And it gives a lot of credit to being creative and innovative and coming up with new things. And, you know, it went through smaller hooks and smaller leaders, and it went to the worm fly, and then it went to double hand retrieve. Always thinking about a different way to entice that fish. You ever been to Rome?
Yes.
Did you go to the Sistine Chapel? Mm-hmm. Did you see
probably the painting,
the tarpon on the ceiling? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that was a long time ago. That was painted. They're pretty resilient fish.
That was barely before you were born.
Yeah, that's right. I was born a year or two later. Pretty amazing fish.
Yeah.
And, you know, when he painted that as a great fish. Mm-hmm. Well, he didn't exactly mean that it was a great fish. He meant that it was a big fish. The Old Testament called it a a great fish. The New
Yeah.
Testament called it a whale.
Yep.
So, but I'm still with Mike. I agree with him. Michelangelo.
You're on first name
Yeah,
basis?
It's a great fish. The greatest there ever was. Yeah.
All right. Well, Poon, we're at 1 hour, 51 minutes. The last question I'm going to ask you, and we're ended off on this one, is as if you're talking to the younger generation, think Hayden when he was 14, 12. What is a piece of advice you'd give them going into this industry as a professional, either in the guiding, or anything in regards to the outdoor industry?
Yeah, I agree with that.
Reiterate.
You know what? You're going to have somebody along your way pick you up. You're going to have somebody say, come with me. I've got something to show you.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that, it's going to be very difficult for you to learn this sport. You've got to have somebody that you ingratiate yourself to through courtesy, through respect. I've heard it said that guides in their fisheries act like they own the place.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? They do. They do. They earned it. They earned it because they paid for it. They paid for it with their hard work, days and days and days on the water to learn what's going on underneath that water. I'm reminded of the two guys sitting on the side of on the bank of a big body of water, and one of them says, boy, there's a lot of water out there. And the other one says, yeah, we're just looking at the top of it. To learn what's going on underneath that water is a lifetime of hard work.
Mm.
And they make the rules in their fisheries because they know what the rules should be. And so give them great respect because all they're trying to do is protect their backyard where they're making their living. We, as recreational fishermen, are playing. They're working. So get one of them to pick you up along the way. Because if you look at all those guys down in the Keys, every one of them will tell you, if you ask them the questions you've asked me tonight, they'll tell you somebody along the way picked them up
Mm-hmm.
and taught them the etiquette, the right way to do things, the respect that you have to pay to the guys that were before you. And that's how you're going to make it in this sport. You're not going to make it without somebody like that.
You just got to be there on every time and every condition.
You're right.
I mean, you got to be there at the last hour of the daylight, the first hour of the daylight. You got to be there every freaking time.
There's not an ounce of quit in it. If you really want to make it in this sport, whether it's a guide or whether you want to be, a factor in this sport and learn, and you got to go all in.
Mm-hmm.
Never have someone tell you where these fish are.
No, go find them.
I'm going to go find him. All right. Well, with that being said, we're almost a 2 hour mark. We're not going to cross that 2 hour barrier. This has been a fantastic conversation. I'm really glad that Nate brought up your name months ago and mentioned this as a possibility. I wasn't even considering bringing my stuff up here. And then he kind of gave me the rundown and why I needed to talk to you. And I was all for it. So I'm really glad that we actually made this happen.
Well, I'm so glad I got a chance to meet you.
Likewise.
And maybe we'll get to wet a line sometime together.
Yeah, you tell me.
I'll take you in that rowboat out there.
All right. Well, we got nothing left to do but just get on out of here.
All right, partner.
Cool.
See-